Where's your playlist taking you? Down the highway? To the mountains? Or just into daydream mode while you're stuck in traffic? With over 4,000 hotels worldwide, Best Western is there to help you make the most of your getaway, wherever that is. Because the only thing better than a great playlist is a great trip. Life's the trip. Make the most of it at Best Western. Book direct and save at bestwestern.com.
Your emotions are not the problem. Your emotions are never the problem. You're not the problem. It's the resistance to them that is making you feel stuck. You're playing by the rules. And then we get to a certain point where it just feels like shit. And we're like, what is the antidote? Sometimes it's the four holy emotions: grief, terror, rage, and shame. The more we suppress those emotions, the more they own us. The more we witness those emotions, the more we allow them the space that they need to be processed, the more they can serve as guides to us. You're listening to Make Some Noise Podcast, episode number 659. Welcome to Make Some Noise Podcast, your guide for strategies, tools, and insight to empower yourself. I'm your host, Andrea Owen, global speaker, entrepreneur, life coach since 2007, and author of 3 books that have been translated into 18 languages and are available in 22 countries. Each week, I'll bring you a guest or a lesson that will help you maximize unshakable confidence, master resilience, and make some noise in your life. You ready? Let's go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm so glad that you are here, partly because this is episode 2, lesson 2, I should say, in the 10 lesson series that I'm calling Coming Home to Yourself. The reason that I'm calling it that is because all 10 of these episodes are weekly and they're leading up to my 50th birthday, which is in April. So this is lesson 2. If you didn't listen to lesson 1, I highly recommend that you go back and listen to it. It was my favorite one because it was my only one. But I wanted to kick it off talking about self-abandonment and self-trust, two things that are coming up in my life a lot lately over the last couple of years. And my apologies if you can hear my dog drinking out of the toilet behind me. I assure you this is a professional podcast. I don't actually think that you could hear it, but she never ceases to amaze me with her timing. Anyway, I also wanted to tell you that Write Your Way Through It starts next week, starts on February 26th. If you're listening to this late, you can also start later. I am going to lower the price as the time goes on, but it's not one of those classes where you have to be there from the very beginning. If you miss 1 or 2 of the first weeks, you can easily join us. So Write Your Way Through It is a 6-week online program where I am guiding you towards transformation. And here's the thing. When I see a program like this, I often think, will this actually work for me? You know, it's affordable. And at the same time, like, your time matters. Your time is a valuable resource. So I always ask myself when I'm thinking about signing up for something like this, will this actually help me? Will this work for me with the transformation that you're looking for? Here's what I want you to know. The real magic of journaling and writing your way through it, as I like to call it, isn't just writing things down. It's what happens after you write, or even sometimes during you write. It's the clarity that you get when your tangled thoughts, when the things that are swirling around in your mind and your body finally make sense on paper. It's the relief of releasing emotions that you didn't even realize you were holding on to. Right? Which we're going to talk about those. I'm talking about 4 big ones today. It's the insight that you get that can help you see exactly what has been keeping you stuck and then what to do about it. And then you can, because you've connected those dots. Journaling is one of those things that I procrastinate on, that I drag my feet on as a student, and always, without fail, when I'm done, I'm glad that I did it. Right now, I'm so glad that I have been journaling over the last handful of years, because when I get into like one of those, like, do you ever drop into like those panic moments? Is it just me? I kind of doubt it. But I go back and I look at my journal, the entries that I wrote when I was on fire, when I was tapped into my intuition and I knew truly what was in store for me. I believed in my greatness. I believed in the possibilities of my life. Those journal entries, I read those back to me, and they're like love letters to myself. I didn't realize when I was writing, but they were love letters to my future self. Anyway, I love when women gather. I have watched them gather and go from feeling emotionally overwhelmed, stuck in the same cycles, unsure what they really want, unsure what to do, to feeling lighter, more clear, confident, having more self-trust, all because they made the space for their own voices on the page. AndreaOwen.com/program. Early bird pricing is through this week, and I cannot wait to see you. This is usually a fairly small group, so you will get one-on-one time interaction with me. And all the information is on the info page over there, AndreaOwen.com/program. Oh, hey, wait, before we jump in, if you want worksheets for these, they are at AndreaOwen.com/659. There are specific worksheets for each of these episodes, and there's one for this one too. There are journaling prompts and questions to help walk you through this, because this one's a doozy. These 4 holy emotions are a doozy. I highly encourage you to grab those worksheets and work it out for yourself. AndreaOwen.com/659. It's in the show notes for this episode. All right, my loves, let's get into the content today. All right, so why is this a life lesson? Why did I choose, of all the 10 life lessons, that one of them would be about what I call the 4 holy emotions? They are grief, terror, rage, and shame. Why did I choose an entire episode to talk about these 4? I have found that these 4 emotions are the most common that have the capacity and the power to keep us stuck. They are the ones that we avoid the most, that we are the most afraid of, that we are terrified to process, to look at, to talk about. And we all have it. We all have had moments in our lives where we have experienced grief, terror, rage, and shame. And notice I didn't say sadness, fear, anger, and embarrassment. No, grief, terror, rage, and shame, all the way over on that shadow side of the spectrum. That's what we're going to talk about. That is one of the reasons I wanted to bring it as an entire life lesson. So all of these 10 life lessons that I'm talking about, over from last week's to this one to the 8 that are going to come after that, these are specific things that have made such an impact, not just on my life, but on my personal growth over the last almost 50 years. I wanted to very seriously sit down and think about the 10 main things that have moved the needle so much in my personal growth, that have almost propelled me and pushed me to the next level in my life. And this is one of them, the 4 holy emotions: grief, terror, rage, and shame. These are portals to our power. These 4 emotions are portals to our power. They can help us become aligned with our voice. They can help us go deep in our own personal growth, and we need to talk about them. So that's what we're going to do today. I was thinking before I got my notes together for this episode about moments in my life where I've felt these various emotions, and one of the first things I thought of was when my father passed away, and the grief that I experienced then. And that one was pretty much just grief. I didn't experience a whole lot of terror, rage, and shame. But then I thought, oh, you know what? You know what was the circumstance in my life where I experienced all 4 of those at the same time, was when my life exploded in 2006. And it was just kind of the start of it. This particular 18 months, I experienced all 4 of these 2 different times. So the first time was when I found out my first husband had an affair and got his girlfriend pregnant and was going to divorce me. The grief I had over losing my marriage, his family. I had been with him since I was 17 years old. I was very close to his family. So it was major grief. And the grief of wanting to start a family with him and realizing that was not in the cards for me. That had been taken away from me. Someone else's decision made that not going to be a part of my future. So a lot of grief, so much terror of what my life was going to look like without him. There is a line in Landslide by Fleetwood Mac where Stevie Nicks sings, "I've been afraid of changing because I've built my life around you." That was where I was at. I was a 17-year-old girl when I met him and entered a relationship. And there I was, 30, and terrified of my future without him. Absolutely terrified of what the next few years, decades were going to look like. The rage that I had for what he had done to me was unlike anything I had ever experienced in my life. I was beyond furious, partly because the level of humiliation that I had experienced with what happened, which the humiliation bounced back and forth with shame. So shame and humiliation, research shows us that we experience it the same. We experience that emotion the same physiologically. However, the difference is that when we feel humiliated, we don't feel like we deserved what happened to us. When we feel shame, we do. This is why most of the time when you're experiencing humiliation versus just shame, you are more likely to talk about it. You're more likely to speak out about it. And shame is different. So I bounced back and forth between humiliation and shame. I was ashamed of where I had ended up. I was ashamed that that had happened to me. It is an interesting level of shame when, as a woman raised in a patriarchy who is socially conditioned to have so much of our value be placed on being picked and being partnered, when you are left for another woman, it's its own level of shame. So the shame and the rage and the terror and the grief were all intermingled and connected. Kind of switching gears, in terms of the emotions themselves, we've been conditioned to see these as bad emotions or negative emotions, especially if you lean into the spiritual community when they talk about vibration and how those, especially those four, low vibration, your low vibe. So I don't subscribe to that. I mean, whether they are low vibration or not, they're normal human experiences, and it's very important to actually feel them. But again, my point is that we've been conditioned to see these as bad emotions, negative emotions, and they're to be avoided, suppressed, or denied. And I want us all to be able to reframe that, even if it's something that you look at, which I think can be common. If you look at any of those emotions as just scary or just unattractive, just no thank you, that can still be, you're still looking at it as an obstacle and something to be avoided. I'm hoping that the reframe can be that these four holy emotions are our sacred messengers. Again, they are our portals to power. So I want to just quickly break down what I mean by the portal to power by each one. Grief is the portal to love, attachment. It can be the portal to transformation. I'm going to go in depth a little bit more around these kind of quick definitions in just a minute. Grief, it can be the portal of love, attachment, transformation. Terror points directly to our body's ancient wisdom about survival, for sure. And also an indicator into deep courage. Our terror can point us like a compass to where we need to look to courage, where we need to find that in ourselves. Rage is the fire that tells us something is deeply, deeply unjust or misaligned. Rage tells us that one of our values is being suffocated, stepped on, stomped on by something or someone. And shame can be the most illuminating, and maybe I'm biased in that opinion because of the work that I do. But it can point to places we've been conditioned to reject ourselves. It can point to identities that we have that are usually subconscious, that we've created in our mind, that are a way to keep us safe, but that don't actually matter to us. Ways that we want, when I say identities, ways that we want to be seen by others that come from just our social conditioning, people pleasing, et cetera, et cetera. So shame can be really illuminating in that way. Each one of those, grief, terror, rage, and shame, each one, when met with curiosity instead of fear, curiosity instead of avoidance, can lead us closer to our personal power. This excites me to no end. I know I might be a little bit weird in that, but this excites me to no end. We need to take a quick ad break. When we get back, I'm going to talk about how, like, what does it look like when we're resisting these four holy emotions? We'll be right back. Did you know that when your metabolism is working properly, you'll feel the benefits in literally every aspect of your life? I've found a valuable tool that's been a game changer for me. It's called Lumen. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's this sleek little device that measures your metabolism through your breath. On the app, Lumen shows you whether you're burning fat or carbs and gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workout, sleep, and even stress management. Here's how it works. First thing in the morning, you breathe into your Lumen. It tells you what's happening with your metabolism, whether you're burning mostly fat or carbs, and gives you a personalized nutrition plan for the day. And it doesn't stop there. You can check in with Lumen before and after meals or workouts so you know exactly how your body is responding in real time. It's like having a metabolism whisperer in your pocket. And here's why this matters. Your metabolism is like the engine of your body. When it's running smoothly, everything improves. Plus, Lumen even tracks hormonal shifts like your cycle or menopause, adjusting its recommendations to keep you fueled and feeling great. Take the next step to improving your health. Go to lumen.me/noise to get 20% off your Lumen. That's LUMEN.me/noise for 20% off your purchase. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. Let's talk about something that doesn't get enough airtime: perimenopause and menopause. Hot flashes, sleepless nights, mood swings, brain fog, body changes. You're not imagining it. It's real and it's frustrating. But here's the good news. You don't have to live like this. Meet MIDI Health, specialized care just for women navigating this stage of life. With MIDI, booking a virtual visit is simple. You'll meet with a compassionate clinician who gets it. They'll listen to your symptoms, answer your questions, and create a personalized care plan just for you. MIDI Health treats hot flashes, night sweats, trouble sleeping, painful sex, vaginal dryness, and libido changes, weight and body changes, brain fog, memory lapses, moodiness, anxiety, and depression, period problems, hair and skin changes, joint pain, bone loss, and fracture risk, and more. MIDI's recommendations can have a huge impact on your well-being. And guess what? Visits and prescriptions are covered by major insurance providers. No memberships, no hidden fees. If insurance isn't an option, their affordable cash prices keep care within reach. You deserve to feel amazing. Don't wait. Book your virtual visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com. MIDI Health, specialized care for your next chapter. I want to talk to you all about something I've struggled with in the past, and that's my relationship with food and my body. I struggled with anorexia for years in my 20s, and finding good treatment and reaching recovery was complicated for several reasons. One being that treatment wasn't covered by insurance simply because I still got my period. It was frustrating to have to handle it all on my own. Eating disorders are so common, but really aren't talked about enough. That's why I'm excited to introduce you to Equip. Equip is a virtual, evidence-based eating disorder treatment program that helps you recover at home so you don't have to press pause on work, family, or other important parts of your life to heal your relationship with food. Equip provides you with a dedicated care team that can include a therapist, a dietitian, medical provider, and a mentor who has been through recovery. Equip treats patients of all ages with all types of eating disorders, is covered by insurance, and has no wait list. If you're struggling with your relationship with food and your body, or know someone who is, don't wait to get a free consultation with Equip. Visit equip.health/noise to learn more about Equip's virtual, accessible eating disorder treatment. That's Equip, EQUIP.health/noise. All right, we're back. How do we typically resist the four holy emotions? Grief, terror, rage, and shame. One of the ways that we do that is through developing coping strategies over time that, like I say, they work until they don't. I wrote about 14 of them in How to Stop Feeling Like Shit. You might be here because of that particular book. And so, as I remind you, these are the numbing, the perfectionism, the people pleasing. For some people, it's workaholism. It's the, perfectionism can look like even social media, trying to curate this way that we look. It can even look like, I remember a time when My marriage wasn't great. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to redecorate the living room because I wanted something to do that I could work on, that I can control, that would change shape and make me feel better about things. And that's what I did. That was a coping strategy. And I honestly, I knew it when I was doing it. For some people, it's dissociation. We also blame, we overachieve, anything that we can do to try to feel better by not addressing the elephant in the room, these 4 heavy emotions. I will call them heavy. And also, as I mentioned before the break, we resist these emotions through buying into the cultural narrative around negative emotions. Anytime someone says that, even if I'm being interviewed on a podcast and someone mentions it, I will politely reframe it to that. And just, I say, like, I don't think any emotions are negative or positive. They just are. They're just part of the human experience. Like even that can be life-changing. To view emotions just as part of the human experience. I remember Amy Smith told me years and years and years ago, I had just gotten sober and I was dealing with something really difficult. And we were talking about that was the first time that I had ever dealt with something really difficult and emotional without being able to turn to a bottle of wine. And she said, you know, what if you just look at your emotions as your body's way of taking care of you? Like, what if you just looked at it as your body's way of processing information? And that's it. And you could look at it as something like sweating or sneezing, like these things that our body does to get us back to homeostasis. What if emotions, like the way that we feel, like what happens inside of our bodies that our nervous system takes care of, our endocrine system takes care of, like what if that was just it? Like we make emotions mean. We make them have so much more meaning than they need to. What if we didn't have to do that? Really examining that belief I had around emotions was incredibly helpful in shifting the way that I looked at them and my ability and courage to be able to walk through them. Because I'm sorry to tell you, we cannot avoid them. The only way out is through. Another way that we resist these emotions is really we just hold on to them. And the nervous system, God bless it, does an amazing job of doing this sometimes. Like our body holds onto these emotions. And eventually, what I have come to know in my almost 50 years on this planet is that they demand expression. They will end up winning. Like the book says, the body keeps the score. Body does not forget. The emotions do not go away. And I am convinced that my autoimmune that I was diagnosed with in 2022, I believe it was, February-ish, 2022, was part of that. There were some things that I was not looking at, and my nervous system said, we're done. We're gonna start to break some systems down. So those are the ways that we typically resist these emotions. And so next I'm going to get into how to work with these emotions instead of working against them. The first step, and I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but I might a little bit. The first step is recognizing that these emotions are not here to ruin you. I used to believe that. I probably could not have told you that like from a practical standpoint, but deep down, I thought these emotions are here to ruin me. They're not. They're there to guide you back to yourself. The work is about learning to be with them and learning to move through them, allowing them to move through you, surrendering to that in a way that transforms them into power instead of something you're constantly running from. And I'm going to tell you something. 12, 15 years ago, if somebody would have told me this, I would have been a little skeptical. I'm like, you sure about that? I promise you that is true. Learning to be with them in a way that transforms the emotions into power instead of something you're constantly running from. Because each of these emotions has an unmet need. Each of these emotions has a truth to them. They have a deep intelligence beneath them, within them, from them. When we meet them with curiosity instead of avoidance, they become these portals to personal freedom. They become portals to clarity, because they come from curiosity. They come from portals of self-trust instead of self-abandonment. And yes, I'm going to link these back to self-abandonment because it all coincides. If I'm not mistaken, it was Emily Dickinson that said, grief is the shadow of love. You don't grieve what didn't matter. At least the internet told me that she said that. So I hope it is. Grief is the shadow of love. You don't grieve what didn't matter. Grief tends to show up when we lose something that mattered deeply, a relationship, an identity. There's something called ambiguous grief, which is more like that, like the loss of an identity, the loss of a dream that never came to be. Grief can also be the pain of past self-abandonment. So just planting that little seed. Grief can also be the pain of past self-abandonment or current self-abandonment. This is why we often avoid grief, because when we sit with it, when we acknowledge it, when we let it in the door, it means to acknowledge the depth of what was lost, and that fucking hurts. Sometimes it's easier to stay in the place of anger for what happened to us. It's easier to stay in a place of hope that things will change. It's easier to stay in a place of hope and possibility that things might be different than grieving the way that a situation actually is or a person actually is. That's how much we avoid grief. But unprocessed grief can harden into emotional disconnection from yourself and from others. It can harden into bitterness. Unprocessed grief can harden into just all around numbness. When we recognize grief, I think this is something that doesn't get talked about enough. And it was something that was such an aha moment for me when I realized this. When we realize that our emotion that we're feeling is beyond sadness, when we realize that it's grief and we recognize that it's grief, it's also evidence to us that we are capable of deep, deep love and deep, deep meaning. And sometimes that makes us angry or have another emotion that we allowed ourselves to have such a deep love and a deep meaning with someone that hurt us. So it can get complicated, right? It can get layered and complicated. I just want to say one more thing about grief before I move on to terror, is that we betray ourselves by not allowing space to feel. We betray ourselves when we do not give ourselves the capacity and the freedom to feel. And honoring grief is a part of reclaiming self-trust. Honoring your grief is a part of reclaiming self-trust. Okay, let's talk about terror. Terror can be the gateway to courage and also deep, deep safety. Before we get too much into it, I definitely wanted to make a distinction between fear and terror. Terror is a step up from fear. It is a more intense experience of fear, and it is an experience that can feel overwhelming and, for many, completely paralyzing, whether that's physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever it is. It can come along with a deep sense of dread and or panic. So that's why I wanted to be very specific that it's terror that I'm talking about. It's that deep visceral fear that grips our nervous system, really. And many times it's tied to real danger. This could be trauma, childhood experiences, unsafe environments. But other times it's a response to an expansion, an invitation, as I like to call it, to something bigger and better in your life, but all the while you are stepping into something unfamiliar, and it can feel like terror, 100%. We resist terror or anything that even has the possibility to turn into terror because it feels like too much. It's too overwhelming. If it's just your kind of like average run-of-the-mill fear, sometimes that feels a little bit easier to control. But with terror, it can feel way too big to try to escape it or shut it down or control it. And for sake of conversation, just for sake of conversation, I want to make sure that when you're thinking of experiences where you've had terror in your life, try to think of it from a place of when you were about to expand. So maybe you went through a major transition in your life. Maybe you got laid off, or something happened during the pandemic. Because Lord knows all of us have some kind of pandemic story where we were sort of asked to show up, or an invitation for a new time, or just went through a really hard time and now we're being asked to change our lives. Any kind of life transition where the fear has felt overwhelming, where you've been asked to step into your power or do something meaningful and powerful. That's sort of what I'm talking about. When you're in one of those situations, the work might come up and be creating safety within it, doing whatever you can to create safety within it. So this might look like grounding practices. I've had experts on, nervous system experts. You can even Google or use ChatGPT to come up with some grounding exercises to help ground your nervous system if you're feeling a sense of terror or fear. It's like self-holding, things like that. Also, some experts talk about titration. So it's letting yourself feel in small doses. So that might look like if you're journaling about worst case scenarios, maybe you're starting a new business and you're terrified of it, putting yourself out there. So titration might be doing just a quick journaling on like worst case scenarios and what that could be. And this might be something that you do with a therapist, especially if you are anxiety prone, like a lot of us. But terror, because it's a more visceral and kind of step up from fear, definitely is one of the holy emotions that can really be helped if you work with a therapist or a trained professional, especially, again, if you struggle with anxiety. Also, because women, we are conditioned to minimize our fear. We're conditioned to override it. And I want to make that distinction between feeling like this isn't safe, fear, and you leaning into your intuition and trusting that intuition that maybe something is not safe for you, or versus the expansion fear. That's the kind of fear and sometimes terror that comes when you're about to do something powerful. That is the distinction that I want to make here as I'm talking about terror. Okay? All right. We are going to talk about rage. I've mentioned to you guys here on the show that I have a mildly strange obsession with female rage. And I want to make that distinction, not men's. The she's and the they's. I think that I am mildly obsessed with it because I've had so much of it. And when I allow it, rage has been one of the things that I didn't suppress it for very long. It was kind of the only one that I felt I had the easiest access to out of these four, out of all the emotions, but especially out of these four. I saw firsthand, rage was the first one of these four that I saw firsthand. Oh, this is where my power is. This is absolutely keys to the kingdom for me. And so I know that that's not everyone's experience in terms of how easy I let it into my life. And so the reason I chose rage and not anger is because, anger can be that just a general feeling of irritation or hostility, just being mad. But rage is more intense. It can feel uncontrolled. It can also be many times characterized by violent or aggressive behavior, which is typically not common for women, but it's the intensity of it. Rage is anger's intense sister. It can feel powerful and explosive. And what rage tells us is that something is unjust, something is being ignored, something is misaligned. It's a signal that something deeply matters. And I mean, no one's gonna be surprised when I say this. Women are taught to suppress rage because it's too much, it's unattractive, nobody likes an angry woman. I'm using air quotes over here. We're rewarded for being accommodating and chill and the cool girl and not making anyone else uncomfortable with our anger or our rage. But that rage goes underground. I'll tell you, it goes underground and it turns into bitterness, exhaustion, resentment, self-doubt, self-worth issues, negative self-talk. The resentment, though. Ooh, the resentment. That one, unexpressed rage turns into the most hellish resentments. And I truly believe, again, that is part of why I got sick. Anyway, we're not here to talk about that. So the work is, instead of suppressing your rage or your anger, asking yourself questions like, what is this anger asking me to see? If you go to AndreaOwen.com/659, there is a free downloadable, there's worksheets that go with this that will walk you through each of these so you can do the work. So please, please do that. I know a lot of you like a good worksheet. So I've made worksheets for every single one of these 10 episodes. So again, AndreaOwen.com/659. Quick little interruption there. Again, the question of what is this anger asking me to see? What is this rage pointing me to? What is it trying to protect? I am a firm believer that it can be enormously helpful, powerful, healing to let the rage move through you, whether it is writing an very angry letter that you will never send, a rage letter to someone where you do not hold anything back. And in those cases, I highly encourage you to password protect it or destroy it after you're done. The work can also look like screaming into a pillow. I'm a big fan of screaming in the car. I either will scream song lyrics. That makes me feel better. You can scream into a pillow. You can punch a pillow. You can go on an angry walk. You can go to a rage room. You can make your own rage room. Please be safe. If it's in your garage or something, please be safe. Wear safety goggles. You can channel it into truth telling instead of self-destruction. You can channel it into setting healthy boundaries, calling people in, advocating for yourself, doing grassroots locally, whether that's, politically or for whatever causes that you believe in. Allowing your rage to have a voice is a direct route to better self-trust. Because when we don't, when we push it down, we are self-abandoning. We are walking away from ourselves. And I don't want that for you. Okay, we need to take one more break. And when we get back, I'm going to talk about the last one, the last holy emotion, and that is shame. And then I'm going to bring it all together.
I know every operating system like the back of my hand.
I have 25 years of experience and have worked with several people from your company. I've been recognized for my passion. My team is everything.
LinkedIn delivers candidates who rise above the rest. With an up-to-date view into shared connections, skills, and interests you won't find anywhere else. See why 86% of small businesses who post a job on LinkedIn get a qualified candidate within a day. Post a job for free at linkedin.com/achieve. LinkedIn, your next great hire is here.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. During tax season, your personal info travels to a lot of places. Between payroll, your tax consultant, and the IRS. If your W-2 gets exposed, that's just the ticket for identity thieves. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it guaranteed or your money back. Don't let identity thieves take you for a ride. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Are you a parent in need of a laugh and a little escape? Look no further. Parenting is a Joke is the podcast you've been waiting for. Hey, I'm Ophira Eisenberg. I'm a stand-up comic and parent. And each week I chat with one of my top comedian pals who, just like you, are juggling careers, busy lives and schedules, and raising a family. You can expect candid stories, hilarious mishaps that happen on stage and at home, and just a lot of laughs. There's no expert advice here. Well, actually, sometimes a good idea does sneak its way in, but mostly just pure, relatable fun to remind you that we're all in this parenting adventure together. New episodes of Parenting is a Joke drop every Tuesday, so tune in, get ready to laugh, unwind, and maybe even feel a little bit better about your own parenting. Because sometimes that's exactly what your therapist, pediatrician, and bartender ordered. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast platform.
Okay, the last of the 4 holy emotions, shame. Shame is the mirror of self-acceptance. It is the mirror of self-acceptance. And boy, has this been a wild ride. Both working on my own shame stuff over the last 11 plus years and also facilitating it for other people. It's been wild and so helpful. And by wild, I mean, it's never linear. I see patterns over and over again, but I'm still many times surprised at the stories that I hear. I also can tell you that our stories are universal. They are universal. The experience of feeling shame comes down to the fact that shame is a story. The really great news is that we get to rewrite it. That is a mouthful. We get to rewrite it, our story around shame. Shame out of all of these can be the most isolating emotion. It tells us a story that if people see this part of us, they will leave me. And I'm going to tell you something that I really want you to listen to. Okay, are you listening? I have been doing this work, both personally and professionally, specifically around shame, for 11 years now. Yeah, 11 years. I got certified in the summer of 2014. And I will tell you this, it doesn't matter how much we know about it in terms of looking at the research and then also doing the actual therapeutic work to develop shame resilience. It still hits us in the fucking face. It still happens. I still have it. It still comes up pretty consistently as it did before. I would say a little bit less, and I don't think that necessarily comes from doing shame resilience work. I think that just comes from my age, and I'm happily getting to the point where I just don't care as much about what other people think of me and their opinions and judgments as much as I used to. So I think that that's also plays a role in this. But in terms of the resilience around it, the difference is that I am just quicker on the draw in terms of being able to see it quickly for what it is. Like, oh, this is shame. And then be able to take the steps necessary in order to move through it and then past it and have it be in my rearview mirror instead of me swimming in it and drowning in it and, the feeling like the whole world is falling apart. That's the difference. I still have almost as much as I always have. I just am able to move through it faster. I had to say that because when I read in my notes, like if people see this part of me, they will leave. I'm like, oh yeah, last week. 100%. Quick shame 101, shame and guilt, the difference. So guilt points to behavior. So it says, I did something bad. Shame points to a person, I am bad. So it attaches to our identity, our character as a person. Shame can come from past wounds. It can come from moments where we felt broken, not enough, et cetera, et cetera. It can come from our social conditioning. It can come from definitely our upbringing. Anytime we are a part of a system or community where the messages either explicitly or implicitly told us this is how we do things around here. So we are at risk of falling away from those and then being seen as othered. Our identity gets put into question. The work is that, I have a whole program around it. That's the Daring Way. You can come and do that with me one-on-one. It's an intensive package. Brene Brown's books are great on this. And also I do retreats, usually around once a year. But for the sake of this podcast, for the sake of time, I am going to tell you that there are two things that are the sort of antidotes or the disruptors of shame. And that is self-compassion and empathy. Obviously, self-compassion is something that we can do for ourselves. I don't mean to say it like that, like it's super easy peasy. It's an ongoing process, how we speak to ourselves, if we're kind or not, if we give ourselves some grace or not. Empathy is something that we get from other people. That is when you have developed a trusting relationship with someone and you can show up and they can truly see and hear you and the experience that you had without trying to fix it, without trying to one-up you, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to say this last thing about shame and how it points back to self-abandoning. We self-abandon because we're trying to survive. It's a survival response to shame. Often in our early experiences is when we learned to do that. We learned that we weren't acceptable as we were. So we try to please and perform and perfect and prove so that we can be accepted, so that we can be loved, so that we can be safe. And oftentimes, in order to do that pleasing, performing, perfecting, and proving, we're self-abandoning. We're not speaking up for ourselves. We are getting into relationships with people that we know aren't good for us, or we stay in relationships with people that we know aren't good for us. And sometimes that's our family. Sometimes it's a particular religion. Sometimes it's a particular rules that, again, like this is how we do things around here, that we fall into just for a matter of safety, survival, our identity. And it's just a survival response to shame. The path back, the way that we come home to ourselves, the starting point is self-compassion. The starting point is being able to tell your story to someone who is safe for you, and having oodles and oodles. I hit the microphone. I was excited of self-compassion with that. And that being said, again, Write Your Way Through It is a group that's like that. We gather, we have the ability to tell some stories and get some laser coaching on it and some journaling prompts so that you can write your way through it. All right. To summarize, in conclusion, your emotions are not the problem. Your emotions are never the problem. You're not the problem. It's the resistance to them that is making you feel stuck. It's your resistance to feeling them that is the thing that needs to be looked at. Okay? The emotions are not the problem. You're not the problem. You're not broken. You're playing by the rules. You've done what was set up for you. And then we get to a certain point where it just feels like shit. And we're like, what is the antidote? Sometimes it's the 4 holy emotions: grief, terror, rage, and shame. The more we suppress those emotions, the more they own us. The more we witness those emotions, the more we allow them the space that they need to be processed, the more they can serve as guides to us. The more they can serve as portals of power to us. I promise you that. Emotional fluency equals power 100% of the time. Emotional fluency equals power. And then you can learn to regulate your emotions, that is some high level shit right there, 100%. So I leave you with a question. What if we started honoring these 4 holy emotions instead of fearing them? What if we started honoring these emotions instead of fearing them? So if you would like access to journal prompts just like these, questions on the episode, it's not a quiz or anything. It's for your own personal growth. It's free. Go to AndreaOwen.com/659. It's where the show notes are, and you can download the free worksheets that go with this particular episode. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. I have loved these 2 episodes. I hope you do too. Please DM me on Instagram to tell me, please. And if you share this episode, I always repost your Instagram stories. Thank you so much. Remember, it's our life's journey to make ourselves better humans and our life's responsibility to make the world a better place. Bye for now. Hey, did you know there's free secret podcast episodes waiting for you that are not part of my regular podcast feed? Yes, AndreaOwen.com/free. And you just sign up. You get a link sent to you. It's very secret. It's like a secret club. We don't have a secret handshake. Don't worry about that. But it's these motivating podcast episodes that I made for you. They're under 20 minutes each. There's 3 of them. They're for wherever you are in your life. So head on over there and grab them. They range from really supporting you and seeing you where you are and being compassionate, all the way to giving you a giant kick in your ass and telling you how amazing and gorgeous and phenomenal you are. So AndreaOwen.com/free and get your hands on that free podcast feed.
Hey friends, if you're facing divorce, thinking about it, or navigating the chaos it can bring, I've got something just for you. I'm Kate Anthony, and I host the New York Times recommended The Divorce Survival Guide podcast, your one-stop resource for surviving and thriving through divorce. Each week, we dive into everything from emotional healing and co-parenting to legal strategies and starting over. You'll hear from top experts, powerful guest stories, and maybe a little tough love along the way. Because divorce, it's hard, but you don't have to do it alone. This isn't just about getting through it. It's about rebuilding and reclaiming your life on the other side. Whether you're in the middle of a messy split or planning your next chapter, I've got your back. So hit that follow button and join me on the Divorce Survival Guide podcast, because survival isn't the end, it's just the beginning.